On this episode of the Surviving Outside Sales podcast, I once again have on the co-creator and co-founder, Justin Lohman. Justin and I are going to discuss Rithm, and we're also going to discuss the foundation and the ideas behind the Sales Advocacy Method. It's going to be a great episode. I hope you enjoy it. As always, if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast, hit the like button, share a comment. You can always reach out to Justin or myself. All the information is in the show notes. All right, let's go. Intro. The Surviving Outside Sales podcast, hosted by Mike O'Kelly, presented by Rithm AI. The goal is to get in, dominate, then get out. Surviving Outside Sales. Now on with the show. Welcome back to the Surviving Outside Sales podcast. With me again is Justin Lohman, one of the co-creators and co-founders of Surviving Outside Sales and Rithm AI. Justin, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Mike. How are you doing?
Good. Justin is in Asheville this weekend for a soccer tournament. We wish you lots of goals and to come out on the other end with no injuries. How about that?
At my age, it sounds like a success.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about two big things today on this episode. We've teased it in previous episodes. The first is the Sales Advocacy Method. We're really going to dive deep into that because that is something that Justin taught me that he had learned along the way, and it's been very helpful. It really simplified the process. So we're going to go in deep into that. We're also going to talk about Rithm, the sales technology enablement tool that we created because we wanted to have something that was more efficient for our daily sales life. And so we'll start off with that. Justin hired me in 2014 to work for a pharmaceutical company. And Justin had never managed in North Carolina before. And so Justin comes and rides with me, and I had been in dermatology sales for several years. And the company that we were working for, that I was hired to, was a multi-specialty company: rheumatology, vascular health, orthopedic, pain management, internal medicine, OBGYN, and dermatology. I had never called on every group except for the latter, the dermatologists. And so I remember the first day we drove to Hickory, North Carolina, and Justin says, "Where are we going this morning?" And I said, "Let me get my sheet out." And he kind of looked at me like, "You don't already have a plan?" To which I kind of looked back and I said, "Well, I've never called on these doctors before, so I'm going off whatever list the company gave me." So the first call we go to was a pain management clinic, and they said, "Well, you can't see any reps today. You have to come back on a different day." So I said, "Okay." The second name, we drive about 10 minutes across Hickory to that clinic, and we hear the same thing: "We don't see reps today." Okay, great. We hop back in the car, and then we go to number 3, and we drive 10 minutes back right across the street from our first office. And Justin and I kind of both looked at each other like, I wish there was a way that we could create something much more efficient. It doesn't help that in Hickory, North Carolina, it has some of the most confusing street names in America, I believe. It is directional. There's streets like 14th Street Southeast, then there's 14th Avenue Southeast, and there's Southwests, and there's Norths. It's almost every name is directional. And so that's kind of where the idea was born. Now, we didn't sit there and flush it out and romanticize it that day because, as Justin professes in his career, it is go time. So we continued to make calls, and it continued to happen throughout the day. And we started this process. But that's kind of how it started. Justin, is that an accurate representation? Anything to add?
I'll tell you how I remembered it.
Okay.
It's slightly different, but it's pretty similar. There's always nuances, right? So it was a Tuesday. I had actually driven in from Asheville. And so this was a while ago. And I believe that at some point, Mike had thought about this idea on his own beforehand, and so had I. But it really started to marinate when we saw the problem live. So being that I'm not from the Charlotte and Hickory area, I asked Mike, where are we going today? And he just brightly and smiled real big, and he said, "We're going to Hickory." And I said, "Great." And, I didn't know he didn't know Hickory very well. And I clearly didn't know Hickory very well. And I'm not joking. When I saw these streets, yeah, it's way worse than Mike described it. It's like First Street Northwest by First Avenue Southwest. And you're like, what the heck is going on here? And they could be at the opposite end of town. And so I said, all right, well, what's the plan? Like, where are we going? And he was like, well, I thought you were going to help with that. And I said, well, I'm not from here. And Mike kind of chuckled and I kind of chuckled, and we said, all right, well, let's just look at the data and randomly pick. And who the heck doesn't see you on a Tuesday, right? Like, this was crazy. And so, there's so much materials, collateral, samples, all this stuff you're dealing with, and you're wearing a suit, and it's September, and you walk in and you're all excited, and you're probably still waiting on your business cards at this point. So you've got like a sticky note, like everything is kind of a disaster when you get started, right? So if you're starting off in sales, we'll tell you why Rithm is so amazing. I wish you had this when we started, right? If you're going through change or anything like that. So Mike is a classic case. He's starting over, he's got a new position in a career that he understands very well, and new call points and new variables. And so we look up and, we're randomly selecting where to go because we've never been here before. And we're bouncing all over town. And, we end up in the third office right next to the first office. And we're like, this is ridiculous. And we really didn't talk about that much. It was over months and, conversations as I was kind of coaching him along that, we just thought, we got to help other people out. This is ridiculous. Now, we didn't know how hard that would be. So at points I lament this, but no matter what, I'm glad to always help people out, right? That's why you get into coaching anyway, is you're passing on your knowledge to other people because you really want to see them succeed, and you want to see them have success and go to their families and cheer together and get on the stage at the end of the year and win awards and win money and all that. I think those are a lot of the reasons people get into sales. But, by the third call, I think we've been turned down by the first 3 clinics. We're sweaty. We're kind of defeated. We don't know where we are. And the only suggestion I had made to Mike was, he had been out in the field a few days the week before. And I said, just pick a small town that'd be easy for us to navigate. And he thought he had. And Hickory was the epitome of difficult to navigate because of the directional streets, names, just the ridiculousness. And generally in small town USA, especially in the South, they're the friendliest. They kind of let you in the fastest, even if they don't know you. So there was some method behind the madness of why we started this day like we did. And it just wasn't going to plan, which leads to more of why we created Rithm, because the plan goes astray all the time. Wouldn't you say, Mike?
Oh, yeah. In fact, one of the things that my dad said early in life is you always have to have a plan. Without a plan, there's chaos. But if you have a plan, you can always deviate from it and create a new plan. But if you're just winging it, yeah, I mean, I know some sales reps that wing it, and they do pretty good for a little bit, but they don't create that consistency. The results are not over and over and over again. Why? Because you can wing it in the fall of 2021, but guess what happens? In the winter of 2022, there's going to be different market factors. And then that's what we're going to talk about with the sales advocacy method, is a plan that you can replicate. If you can't replicate that and it's not consistent, then it's not going to last long. So
I feel like it's sales scalability.
Yes, that's a great phrase right there. We haven't said that before. Sales scalability. Dive a little deeper into that. What do you mean by sales scalability?
So I think the point of creating the sales advocacy method, and Mike, actually, you took my words and you said, let's kind of name this, right? Because it's something that we can refer to, not just, that thing you talk about.
Yeah.
So, I never thought of it as a sales advocacy method. So if you've never heard of this before, I mean, we've created it out of thin air, but it will make sense. The name is easy to understand when you understand our formula, right? So I think you're starting to hear terms like scalability, how to scale. There's all these software startups and all these great businesses coming out of thin air that you've never heard of. And I was always kind of thinking to myself, how do they grow this? Well, sales is really about growth. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? And so Mike talked about this, I think, in one of our episodes, and he said, I didn't take vacation for like 7 years. And I remember getting in the car with Mike, and I was like, no, you're going to take vacation. You're doing something wrong, because you need to be at the beach, although you're Irish descent, maybe beach isn't the best place for you. Maybe you should be in the mountains, but wherever makes you happy, you and your family, that's where you need to be. And, I think this really caught Mike's attention. Like, okay, tell me more. How can I get my business to work for me when I'm gone? So we'll just jump into the sales advocacy method a little bit here. So I started a company that had incredible training. We've talked a little bit about this, and there was just this real sense of urgency that they instilled in us. I was 22 when I got hired. 500 people applied for the position. I joke that I think I got the job because I was the only one that was willing to take basically no money, but I was willing to listen. I wasn't stuck in my ways. I've always been more of a growth mindset and a learner. And so this company just almost put us in a team setting, a team environment, which I think was awesome. And it was competitive, but like, we celebrated each other's victories. It wasn't like, oh, you beat me, so you're going to get the award. It was like, we all win by doing our best. And I crave that. I want to find more companies that do that and help companies like that. And then the people who aren't doing that, individuals, at least we can start talking to them through our podcasts, and hopefully those companies start to hear kind of these methodologies. So what is the sales advocacy method? So it's really, you go in, you build your first advocate. Everybody knows what that is. It's somebody that truly believes in the product you're selling. So in something like pharmaceuticals, I mean, you can name the pharmaceutical. I'm not going to get specific. You get them, a provider, a doctor interested in one particular product, right? And you start with one product to show them how you solve their problem. Then when they realize, wow, that was a big problem of mine, and they start prescribing a lot of it, and their patients are getting great feedback, that's when you come in and you say, okay, who do you know that's like-minded? Who do you know that I need to go see? Because me walking in and putting my business card down at a receptionist, there's a good chance they're going to say, no, he's busy, she's busy, they're seeing patients, blah, blah, blah. But in this day and age, actually, not only can you take a business card and have them write a note on it, you can have them text or call another, somebody that's in a position like them. So if it's a doctor in this case, they can pick up the phone and call another doctor or text them and say, hey, I'm sending Justin over to see you today. When I then show up, that doctor's usually told the receptionist, let Justin back, because my doctor buddy told me this, he has something that's going to solve my problem. That alone, if you stop and think about it, can be a game changer for you. Because if you take one advocate and now you have somebody that's very open-minded, that's already vetted this and says this guy's great or this lady is great, you don't have to go through all the rigmarole, right? You don't have to prove yourself in the beginning, and they're usually really cool to you, and they say, wow, Dr. So-and-so really sings your praises and loves your product. If you could start every conversation with that, you're going to sell a lot more. And so I started replicating this. And at this first company that I worked at, the more you did in sales, the more PTO they gave you. They would pay you for time off. And let's be honest, I mean, it's all about commissions, right? So having those commissions consistent and growing is really what you're striving for. And I just started replicating, okay, well, who does this doctor know? And who does this doctor know? And every time I got it to a point where I would see like that first advocate and I'd say, okay, I've gotten those two people on board. Who else do you know? And this one particular doctor, who is still a good friend of mine today, and we have a lot of trust, and we'll text and call, and we have a real friendship, but it's business. I would come in and I would see him go to his computer and Google and start getting addresses and say, okay, you need to see this person. You need to see this person. And this individual, this doctor, was not in my hometown. So I would come in with my plan. I would start by seeing, get up super early, go straight to that office. And I would know that I had my plan, that this individual might add 2 to 3 more physicians to my day for me. And I didn't just stop and say, hey, thanks. I would have him text or call those other people because, again, that warm introduction, it was red hot, to be honest with you. And it really just gets everything going faster. One of the hardest parts about sales is, when is this going to take off? When is this going to grow, right? And I just found that, it just made sense. But nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever taught me that. And so when I hired Mike, I said, oh, you're not doing this? How you grow up in an environment and you think everybody's parents might be just like yours. And then you get out in the real world and you're like, wow, my mom was kind of different than that mom, or, my dad was different than this person, right? In a good way. But you just assume so many people have similar experiences, or maybe you don't, but that's where I was. And then this whole new world was opened up to me. I was like, wow, I've got so much to share. I didn't think I was a very interesting person, honestly, but people started saying, man, tell us more, and I started presenting in front of the companies, and now the VPs of sales, the CEOs, they will call you and say, hey, what are we doing wrong? And that's a pretty good feeling, and that's a pretty good position to put yourself in. So I knew that I had something different, right? I'm not saying I'm better in any way, but I knew that I was developing a system that was different than anybody else. And I started asking around, and nobody had heard of these things. Everybody knows about referrals, but nobody's teaching it. And so that's just a real way to scale your business and do it quickly. If you're selling copiers, right? And you tell a client, my guess is business owners know other business owners. Who do you know? It's such a simple question, but many people listening to this podcast, if they're really out there, they're probably thinking, God, that is simple. I've never done that before. So I don't know, anything to add there, Mike?
Yeah, you said a lot, and I want to unpack a couple things. And so in one of the previous episodes, I talk about the 5 steps in sales. And what Justin really is alluding to is a mindset, and taking everybody from step 4, which is a user. And that's where a lot of salespeople have a lot of clients. They have users. They don't have advocates. So what Justin was mentioning was creating an atmosphere, creating a flow to get more people to be advocates, getting them from step 4 to step 5. And that really is the difference. I kind of hit a wall in my sales career at step 4. And I did very well in many positions getting up to step 4. But as Justin alluded to, in my sales career, I had never taken a week's vacation. The longest I'd ever taken was a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off, because I was terrified if I was out of the field, I wasn't making sales. And so I would use my PTO. I would take I'd take a random day because I was exhausted. Most of my territories were North and South Carolina. I live in Charlotte, and it's 3+ hours to Charleston. It's almost 4 hours to Wilmington. I'd get up at the crack of dawn, drive to Wilmington, and then I'd drive back. I'd get home at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. I'd wake up in the morning and I would just be so physically exhausted. That's how I spent a lot of my time. And so that is where I was stuck in my career, and I really burned myself out. It was grinding, but I wasn't.
A lot of people are stuck right here.
Yeah.
Do you think they even know there's a step 5?
No. And the reason why is I was never taught that. And so I think a lot of people aren't taught that. And so go back to a fundamental flaw that I find in the sales industry. And when I say this, I'm not disparaging any specific person. The flaw I find is companies reward salespeople with management positions and executive positions from territories that have advantages over others. Every company I have been with in the last 15 years, the managers have come from the states of Florida, Texas, California, Illinois, and New York or New Jersey. Now, Justin, I ask you, do they make better salespeople?
So I'm going to carefully answer this. I have to think about this. Look, I think there's great opportunity everywhere. But one thing that frustrates salespeople is let's just talk pharma for a minute. Certain states have inherent advantages. I think salespeople talk about this sort of thing, but you can't blame somebody for growing up where they did, right? And I think one of my friends told me this at a young age. He said, I've got to move to LA. And I said, why? And he said, there's just better opportunity there. And not everybody is willing to move. And so I give credit to those people a lot of times. What I find is, and I don't know that we've talked about this in a long time, before I say that, there are companies that try to address this. They really do. And they're trying to do the right thing. But I mean, if you live in Chicago or you live in Des Moines, where's more population? It's in Chicago. It's no one's fault. There's more opportunity there. So you can't really disparage the salesperson over this, or even the management execs. Look, you live in the right area, you do really well, a lot of life, you're going to get promoted. So good for you.
Yeah.
I could have moved to Texas. Yeah. I would have done really well at my first company because the state Medicaid system covered everything. But I knew that if I moved and they stopped doing that 6 months later, I just picked up my whole life and I was like, is that worth it? Here's the advantage. I had to really hone my skills because I didn't have the inherent advantages everybody else did. And my boss, the guy that hired me, I worked under him for almost 10 years. He was fantastic. And he really did coach me every time we rode together. He wasn't just patting me on the back saying, hey, you're number one, you're great, you're the best. He coached me. It was awesome. And I think great salespeople want to be coached. I think most salespeople want to be coached. But I'm appreciative because I really had to hone my skills, hone my craft.
Yep.
And in my area, in my region, it didn't have the same opportunity as New York. But I'll be honest, I don't know that I'd be that successful in New York, especially right away.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily speak that New Yorker language. So I have a certain level of respect for all of these salespeople. I mean, I know people that have to walk the streets, take the subways. I drive in a car. That's way easier on me, but some people just know how to do all this. So
yeah,
I think it's impossible to take into account all those things. Well, something you said sparked an idea.
Okay.
You've talked about taking over territories and making them go from poor performance to really good performance to great performance. I've had another advantage of starting territories from zero. Mm-hmm. And some people would say it's a disadvantage. I looked at it as an advantage. The truth is, it's just like being in a smaller market. It makes you go through the process and create a process. If you take over a territory in a big market, there might be a plan already there for you. It may have worked and it may not have. So something, it was either good or not. I never had to know, did the person before me mess this up? Or did they succeed? What did they do right? I didn't have to take over somebody else's book of business. And I really think that helps with the referrals, because if you're consistent and you do the right thing the right way for the right reasons over and over, and you build that first advocate, they will go the extra mile for you because you're going the extra mile for them. We're all humans. We all really do want to see each other succeed for the most part. And so I think it gave me a unique perspective, not better, but unique perspective on things. And so the way that Mike articulates the 5 stages, I think a lot of people get to user and don't even realize I got to push through and get advocates. And it's not just through referrals. That's just a great way to scale your business, right? You can do this on your own. You don't have to get referrals. It's so great because those people like you. In pharmaceuticals, for example, if they're using a lot of one or all of your products, they're happy to see you whenever. They'll take your samples, they're excited. You almost become part of the office because you're there solving problems, you're there helping them out with things. They want to tell you about their successes. They're just thankful that you have made that connection with them and brought them a better product. That's a home run, right? And so when they get to know you, they like you so much better. And then you have an advocate, right? And so why not lean on that? I mean, we're all humans, to say, hey, who do you know? And sometimes it's somebody in a different state, and you can call your friend and say, hey, here's a referral. But I've always viewed sales as, if the company I'm with, if everybody is succeeding, we're all going to win.
A rising tide.
I'm competing with myself.
Yeah, a rising tide rises all boats. I can't say that enough.
And not everybody believes that, though. I do.
Yeah.
You believe it.
I will tell you, in one of the previous episodes, I told you there's no absolutes in sales. This is an absolute. You have to get that mindset. If you're listening right now, you have to get your mindset away from this is a net zero or a zero sum game. It is not. It is not. The more sales is elevated, no matter what type of sales you're in, the more that the industry is elevated, everyone wins. And so the cutthroat nature of trying to knock down your opponent, all it does is it just shoots yourself in the foot. So if you want to take that a little further, Justin.
Yeah, well, I mean, back to the, the tide and the ships, right? If we all rise with it, instead of beating each other down, if we elevated each other, that industry would have really been successful. In the early 2000s, unfortunately, they flooded the market. They said, this is so profitable, we got to put 20 people in a territory. Well, doctors didn't like that. I mean, they make their money fixing people, healing them up, taking care of patients. And so, yes, you're bringing value if you've got great tools, but you don't need 20 people with the same tool. So again, I think there's been some missteps. There are in many industries. We're not just picking on one. We just happen to know that industry well. But had we just taken this attitude, and something I appreciated about that first company is we all kind of formed that bond. And so when something worked well, it wasn't like we had a cheat code or a silver bullet or we were trying to dupe people. We just, we hired people that weren't really necessarily aggressive. They were kind-hearted. They were, great work ethic. They would do the right thing. They would go the extra mile for the patient and for the doctor. And that's what made it so special is the visionary behind the company said, the industry is going this direction. We want to go a different direction. We want to stand out because so many people aren't doing the right things anymore. And he used to see that they were doing the right things. And he said, we want to be different by being how it originally was. It's a bit old fashioned, but nostalgia is a big deal, and treating people right is
Surviving
right
Outside Sales podcast is brought to you by Rithm AI. If you are in outside sales, check out rhythmai.com. That's RITHM AI.com. The sales enablement tool that will help outside sales teams build their best sales days every day. Rithm, prospecting, targeting, and routing simplified. Everything an outside sales team needs, nothing it doesn't. Try for $1 for the first month today. That's rhythmai.com. Now back to the show.
I think this leads a little bit into Rithm. I mean, we've talked a bit about the sales advocacy method. There's more we're going to probably flush out over podcasts. Do you want to kind of open that up?
Sure. The sales advocacy method, it is a very simple method once you fully understand and have studied the nuances of it. But in order to properly give it context, it does take a lot of time. And so I think, Justin and I have been asking ourselves, how can we efficiently discuss all the variables? We'll probably be talking about the sales advocacy method in multiple episodes. So continue to listen. Or if you want to know more about the sales advocacy method, please reach out to us. Because I just think it's, you mentioned before, Justin, a lot of people get to that fourth stage. And as a reminder, if this is the first episode you're listening to, the 5 steps of sales are unaware, aware, trial, user, and advocate. And so a lot of the sales industry, and I know a lot early in my career, it was such a grind to get people to that user stage. It wasn't like I gave up or I exhaled or I took a break. It was almost like I thought I was at the top of the mountain. I had no idea that I was not at the top of the mountain until I met Justin, and he was like, what do you mean? And I remember we had a conversation. I don't remember, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly how it came out, but you were like, no, that's kind of just the beginning. Once you get users is the beginning of the sales process. And I was like, what? I thought that was
been exhausting to hear. You're like, I've worked so hard to get here.
I know. I've worked so hard. I've scratched and I've clawed. And this was, I think, like the second or third or fourth month I was in the field, and the turnaround had already started. And Justin was still training me and coaching me in it reminds me of Hoosiers when Gene Hackman's character said, well, right now I'm just breaking all the boys down and then I'm going to build them back up. And that's kind of how you really coach people. You break them down into their base, then you build them back up. And so Justin was doing that over a period of 6 to 8 months. And then once all that took hold, that's where, if you look back at the trajectory of the territory, it really skyrocketed.
So on a side note, Mike later told me he was terrified of me for 6 to 8 months.
Well, because
myself, man, I'm really not coming across right here. That's not at all. Like he said, I was scared to answer your phone calls. I thought you were going to fire me. I think that's just an indictment on the industry, not me. But man, I don't think I was as good as I thought I was at the time.
I had just found out that Justin had fired a guy in training because he was not very, I mean, I don't know if we want to go down that road, but he just was.
Well, I'll just say this.
Okay.
The guy was plenty talented. It just wasn't the right fit. But you didn't hear all this. I think he was like a father to me in sales. I'm really glad to have had this experience. But I thought, again, I'm in my bubble. Everybody goes through this experience. So when you're 6 to 8 months, I was like, yeah, most people probably go through this. I didn't realize how hard. I mean, we had a 4-hour interview, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that in that one of our first episodes. And so, I was always told if it's not a good interview, it's going to be really quick. And hey, we can go to lunch, which is great. There was no lunch, I can tell you that. There was going to be no coffee. That was really to break you down, to set the tone, because training, it's not that all companies don't train. There are companies that are doing great training. We're just seeing a trend, and we've taken this pulse out there that there's less and less time to train. Hey, this territory's been open. We got to get them out there. Let's let them drink through a fire hose, right? Another reason we wanted to help with our Rithm program, because there are so many variables in today's market that how in the heck do you really do it? There are a lot of people out there that have been doing this for a long time that say, no, I do it the right way. That's fine. Are your numbers showing you you're doing it the right way? If you're not at the top of your game all the time, you're probably not. Now, if you're in Des Moines, Iowa, to use your analogy, and you just can't overcome certain things, and you're great at planning, scheduling, routing, targeting, all these things, then you're probably doing a great job.
I credit Foundation. I do credit training for a lot of the resilience, the mettle, the toughness. You get the door slammed on you, something really bad happens to you, and you just keep going. And it happens on a daily basis.
I think it's healthy to have some sort of, a little bit of accountability fear, and it is easy to get soft in certain types of sales.
Especially when you have success.
Yeah, I think changing it up is healthy. I think pushing yourself, having new people to coach you. I actually spoke with a guy yesterday who called me at 4:30 and said, I just dropped my boss off. And he said, it's the first time I've been coached since you coached me. And I said, I haven't coached you in over 8 years. And he said, I haven't had good management. He said, this person sat down with me and said, what are we talking about? What's the goal? What's the plan? He said, I got to tell you, this boss is great. She's going places. Salespeople know what you're supposed to be doing, unless you just don't know what you don't know. We can't sit here and teach you everything. We can talk about sales. Nobody else seems to be talking about sales. I think this is a great market. And I think this is very interesting if you're into sales and you're making more money and doing better. But this is why we created technology to go with it. Because we looked around, we're like, there's just not much out there.
Yeah.
And I see sales getting harder and harder, access being tougher and tougher.
Yeah.
And if you've just been skating along for a while, I think you're in for a rude awakening. And I'm not a doom and gloom, the world is ending type of person. I am an eternal optimist that always has a smile on my face and thinks I'm just living the best life. And I don't think it's going in the right direction in many cases. And I think part of it's because companies are flooding areas with people. That's been drawn back. Now that's not affordable, but they tried something. I don't blame them for it. At the time, it was probably working great. We didn't see these after effects. Now, I wasn't really a part of that. But I think it really goes back to any business. It goes back to efficiency, consistency, persistence, perseverance, productivity. It's not just about activity. Activity is an indicator. Productivity is more, you're getting to the result you want. That's what the advocacy method is about, right? So it's all intertwined. This is why I think it's fun to get our message out there. If you're listening to this podcast and you're a salesperson, we want you to share this podcast with your sales friends. You don't know who you're going to affect. And other people are just driving down the road, listening to radio or listening to whatever. If you think this could help them, might shed a new light on something, gives them a new perspective. I mean, we are interactive hosts. We don't mind answering questions. If you think it would be good to get on with us, we'll have a conversation with you. We'd love to talk. So I just think there's a lot that needs to be buttoned up in sales if we want to keep going in sales and keep improving sales. And I think it starts, years ago, but now as well.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of great points. So the first thing is with surviving outside sales, this is an evergreen conversation. It's going to continue to evolve, continue to grow. Do we have all the answers? No, we don't have all the answers, but we do have some success using certain systems. And that really is what the sales advocacy method is. S.A.M is a process and it's a system. And within that system, there's a lot of nuances. And so, yeah, if I don't know how well I would do if I was dropped in New York. I haven't lived there. I've actually never been to New York City. I've been to like upstate and areas like that, but I don't know how I would do because I'm not in that local market. But you give me a market that's very similar to Charlotte, I know that I could take this method and be wildly successful, but one of the reasons
scalable in New York,
very scalable. Yeah.
It just takes that New York person or somebody that knows how to take that market and learn the plan and then do it,
take it to the next level. And so the sales advocacy method really is taking everything that you're currently doing to the next level. And so, Justin and I, we spent a lot of our free time. I recently started a family within the last couple of years, but when we started this idea, I did not have a family. I was not married. Now I'm married with 2 children. And so you can see how long we've been working on this on the side. And
nights and weekends, man.
Nights and weekends.
And so we're always trying to improve.
Yeah. So we created this because we wanted Rithm to be a way to simply, easily, by clicking a button, you could have the most efficient day possible. So if you're in pharmaceutical sales, if you're in medical sales, specialty pharmacy sales, or if you're in sales where you call on a lot of your clients and you call on them frequently, right now, Rithm is perfect for you. So if you need a call cycle of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or maybe even once a quarter where you want to follow up with your clients or accounts, Rithm is going to help. And what it's going to do, it's going to clear the noise. So all you have to do is sell. And realistically, Justin and I had a conversation about 2 or 3 years ago. And we kind of, we do this a lot where we say, what's the goal? And really the goal is to help the sales industry that has given so much to both of us. We've had to figure out a lot of things that not many people either found or they still struggle with this day. Like Justin said, we don't want people to struggle. That is the whole goal of what we're trying to do, is to help people not struggle where we did in the past. And so we'll
let me comment on the optimizer. So Rithm has what's called an optimizer. And the optimizer takes a bunch of variables, a dozen or more variables. Within this optimizer, it clears the noise, because what we realize is people need to spend more time learning, training, and less time wondering, where am I going? What's my schedule look like? I don't think planning might be the most underrated thing there is in the sales industry. And salespeople in general just don't like to plan. So by signing up for Rithm, it's $1 for the first month. If you don't love it, you don't stick with it, right? Like, we believe in it so much. But if you believe in the methods and you like what we're talking about, this is a no-brainer. So you put your $1 down and you start to realize that Rithm can automate everything. I used to plan for hours on Sundays my entire week. And if anything goes wrong, weather goes bad, train gets stuck, there's a car accident, you can change on the fly with Rithm. The optimizer adjusts in real time and takes away all these variables that no human can really, you can do your best, but no human can beat this kind of technology. And it's not scary, it's fun, it's awesome. It's something that we all need to be embracing. Is technology is taking over in a good way. It's made us more efficient. It's taking away our pain points. I hated planning for hours on Sundays. There were a few times in my first year or two that I didn't plan, and I felt like a disaster. And it all goes back to that accountability at that first company. this is inherent in me. I always have this sense of urgency. I'm excited. I want to get out there. I want to sell. I want to go as fast as I can. Sometimes that's not the best thing. So being able to lean on a technology that says, man, make my life easier, help me sell more, that's everything we wanted. And that's scalable to send out to a bunch of salespeople, right? That's something we can share to the masses. If we just give you advice, that's probably not enough. So I think that's the point of the two parts of this podcast today. So I'll let you kind of finish up, Mike.
Sure. No, I think you said it very well. And that's really what technology is going to do moving forward. Right now, there's CRMs, and almost every company has a CRM. Well, what a CRM is not really preparing you for your best day. And so we created this because we needed it. We needed a way to be more efficient in our day. And so we had to create it because we couldn't find it out there. And so what this does is it helps you, the salesperson, or if you're a manager or an executive right now listening to this, I mean, we hope you are, just not our friends and family. But if you're listening to this, or you want to share this with a manager or an executive, what it does is it puts everybody on the same page and everybody's working the same plan. It's great for managers because they know their sales reps are always going to be working efficient plans. And for the sales reps, it takes all the guesswork away. It really lowers your stress, because the hardest thing is waking up in the morning. And in our industry, I know a lot of people start their day at Starbucks. They kind of figure out their day at Starbucks, and it gives them that 30 minutes to kind of figure out, okay, where am I going today? Who am I going to see? And that's kind of an opportunity loss. I don't know if you want to talk about that, or we can hold that for another.
Yeah, it sounds like material that'll be great for another podcast.
Okay, we'll kick it to another podcast. I do see we've run out a little bit of time. You got to go stretch and get ready for your tournament. You got to go limber up, old man, because I tell you, you're going to be running up and down.
From out of this thing.
How many miles do you think you're going to run, or how many games you're going to play, and then how many miles you're going to run during this tournament?
I hope a lot, because that means we won. I'm registered in 2 divisions, actually. So we'll see. It's all outdoors. It's going to be fun. But
good luck.
Thanks for listening in today. This is always fun. We got a lot more topics to talk about. So I'll let you finish it up, Mike.
Awesome. So good luck, Justin. So I hope you don't get hurt. But if you want to try out Rithm, please do so. We'd love for you to try it out. And it's just $1 for the first month. It's at getrithm.com or rhythmai.com. That's GETRITHM.com or rhythmai.com, RITHMAI.com. You can try it for just $1. You can give us some feedback, and we'd love to hear that. You can also connect with Justin. You can send him an email. You can reach out to him. You can reach out to me. All of our information is going to be in the show notes. And if you also have anybody that you believe should share their story, please reach out to us and let us know. I've already gotten 2 referrals one is from a previous guest, and the other is from a listener who reached out and said, you got
advocates.
I've got advocates now. And so again, that's kind of what, we practice what we preach. And I want to share as many great stories as possible, because I want to show how many variations there are for massive, wild, professional and personal success within the sales industry. So those who are getting in, those who are dominating, and those who are getting out. So Justin, as always, thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mike. Sounds good.